Good afternoon. I want to call this meeting, this work session of the Durham City Council to order at 1 o'clock on Thursday, February the 18th. And I certainly want to welcome everyone here, my colleagues, our staff, and all those who may be watching us, all of our residents who may be watching us as well as we stream. And just glad to see everyone this afternoon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Here.
Councilmember Caballero?
Here.
Councilmember Freelon?
Here.
Councilmember Freeman?
Present.
Councilmember Middleton?
I'm here.
Councilmember Reese?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And just will say that Councilmember Reese has let me know that he's having some competing issues today, that he may be in and out of this meeting, but we will soldier on without you when you need to go. So thank you for letting us know. All right. We'll now turn to announcements by members of the council, colleagues, and the announcements today. All right. Seeing none, then we will move to priority items by the city manager. Madam Manager, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Durham City Council. I do have 3 priority items for your consideration this afternoon. Agenda item number 5, fiscal year 2021-22 City Council budget request to be discussed at the 2/25/21 special City Council meeting budget retreat. Attachment number 1 has been added. Agenda item number 19, 5002 Guardian Drive, a major special use permit. Attachments 5 and 7 were updated. And finally, agenda item number 22, interlocal agreement with Durham County to support emergency rental assistance for low-income households is a supplemental item that has been added. That is all I have this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Colleagues, you've heard the manager's priority items. Can I have a motion for their approval?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
I think that was moved by Councilmember Freelon and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero?
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon?
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton?
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any priority items for the city attorney today? I know Mr. O'Toole is with us.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. There are no priority items for the city attorney's office.
Mr. O'Toole, while you're here, I know that we're not discussing today, but you had an important message for us about item 19 that you have emailed to us about a major special use permit. And I wondered if you would just take a minute to remind the council of our duties in that regard.
Sure thing, Mayor. Item 19 is a major special use permit that needs to be approved after a quasi-judicial hearing. Probably the most important thing is to not engage in discussions related to that matter prior to the hearing. If you do inadvertently, then you should disclose that at the hearing. Another thing that's unique about a quasi-judicial hearing is the applicant and anyone speaking on behalf of the application and opponents get sworn in at the beginning of that hearing, and they have to present what amounts to material, competent, and substantial evidence. And then counsel's decision, counsel acts as both the judge and jury related to that application. They should then consider the evidence presented at the hearing and the criteria that planning staff will provide to you. And then you'll judge whether there's sufficient evidence to grant that application or not. And if any council members have any questions after they review the materials that I provided this morning, Sarah, Kim, or I are happy to answer those questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. That's exactly what we needed. Thank you so much. All right, Madam Clerk, any priority items today?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I did have an item that I wanted to get your direction on, and you had asked me to follow up on the attendance records of the individuals who are on our boards, committees, and commissions who have less than the minimum required attendance. And we did request information from 50% and under, and most of the people at 50% are fine. There are only 3 persons that we have not received any response from. And I was wondering if I could go ahead, or if you would like me to send them removal letters or not.
Madam Clerk, I think what we'll do is we'll vote to accept that as a priority item, and then we'll hold that discussion until after we finish the other items today.
Okay, that
Thank you
sounds
very
good.
much.
Thank you.
Colleagues, you've heard the clerk's priority item. Can I have a motion for its acceptance?
So moved. To approve.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson and seconded by Councilmember Caballero. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to the administrative consent items. Under the City Clerk's office, item 1, approval of City Council minutes. Item 2, Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority Mayor's nominee for appointment. And I'll point out that prior to the meeting, information was added to this appointment. Item 3, Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority appointment. Item 4, under departmental items, Audit Services Department, Fire Inventory and Supplies Management Performance Audit dated January 2021. Under Budget and Management Services Department, Item 5, FY 21-22 City Council Budget Request to be discussed at the 2/25/21 Special City Council Meeting Budget Retreat. Under the City Council's office, Item 6, resolution calling upon President Biden and the U.S. Congress to provide additional assistance to the rental housing community. Under the City County Planning Department, Item 7, expedited hearing request for zoning map change, Casa North Duke. Under also Item 8, Board of Adjustment 2020 Annual Report, and I'd like to pull that item. Excuse me. Under, let's see, Item 9, Historic Preservation Commission 2020 Annual Report. Item 10, Planning Commission 2020 Annual Report. Under Community Development Department, Item 11, approval of J.J. Henderson Senior's new construction affordable housing project and bonds. I'm going to pull that item, and also we have one speaker for that item. Under Department of Water Management, Item 12, purchase of rectangular butterfly valves for groundwater treatment plant. Under 13, Item 13, 2021 unscheduled pipeline repairs, award of construction contract to Carolina Civil Works Incorporated. Item 14, 2021 unscheduled pipeline repairs, award of construction contract to North State Water and Sewer Incorporated. Under the Finance Department, Item 15, bid report, January 2021. Item 16, FY 2021 second quarter annual financial report. I'm going to pull that item. Under Fleet Management Department, Item 17, cooperative group purchase contract, 2 tandem axle dump trucks. Under Public Works Department, Item 18, contract ST 310 pavement preservation project 2021. Under Public Hearing, City County Planning Department, Item 19, 5002 Guardian Drive major special use permit, which the attorney has just discussed with us. Item 20, consolidated annexation Phillips Valley. Item 21, under the Community Development Department, FY 21-22 Annual Action Plan, second needs public hearing. I have a question on that that I'll just like to ask briefly to Mr. Johnson. Is that public hearing the one that we talked about having an additional hearing between the first and the last one? Is this that hearing?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Greetings, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Reginald Johnson, Director, Department of the Community Development Department. That meeting is the meeting that we discussed adding. There will be another public hearing later on in the season. after
Great.
that.
Thank you for adding that. Let me just, and I'm sure you will, but I just want to say to you and the our public information folks that we need to do a good job of publicizing that so that we make sure that people know about that hearing, this additional hearing.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. And then item 22 under supplemental items, Community Development Department interlocal agreement with Durham County to support emergency rental assistance for low-income households.
I'd like to pull that, please.
All righty. All righty, Madam Manager, I believe that we have pulled items 8, 11, 16, and 22, and then a discussion at the end of the clerk's priority items. Is that what you have as well?
That is what I have as well, sir.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to item 8. This is an item that I pulled about the Board of Adjustment annual report. And I'm not sure who will be here from Ms. Young. Great to see you. Ms. Young, there was one administrative appeal held over until the board can begin meeting in person. I assume this was for legal reasons, probably related to something to do with having these hearings during the Zoom era. I may be wrong. And I'm sure, however, that someone is being affected by this delay. And I wondered, what is the situation in the plan?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. That's an excellent question, and I'll do my best to explain. Mr. O'Toole may also decide to jump in at some point. But yes, that appeal, my understanding is that there was not consent from both sides. The opposition, I believe, did not consent to moving forward in the virtual environment, and under the current general statutes for remote meetings, that says that we cannot hold the hearing then. We have to wait until we can hold it in person. I see Mr. O'Toole has popped on the screen, so he may have something further he would like to add.
Thank you.
Ms. Young is, sorry, Don O'Toole, City Attorney's Office. Ms. Young is exactly correct. This was a case in which the city had issued a notice of violation to a property owner. City staff and I were ready to defend that NOV that was being appealed. And the morning of the hearing, the attorney for the property owner indicated that they would not consent to proceeding. And under the state statute that allowed quasi-judicial hearings to be held virtually, if a party doesn't consent, then you can't proceed. And so essentially, the appellant is benefiting by the appeal not being heard.
Is this a situation that's a potentially dangerous situation? Can you tell us a little bit more about, I don't know if you are allowed to tell us any more, given that this was a sort of quasi-judicial, I'm not sure. But I guess I have concern if we've issued a notice of violation, if it's a dangerous situation, do we have other options? That kind of thing.
And, you know, Sarah can jump in here as well. It's a notice of violation for, I'll use the term flea market, a flea market operating on some property, and it's out of compliance with the site plan for the site. Sarah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, the issue was there was some additional modifications made to the site that did not comply with the site plan for the flea market, and that is what was being appealed.
Okay, all right. Okay, good. So it doesn't sound like anybody's life's in danger or physical health, that kind of thing. All right. Thank you very much for that. All right. The next item is item 11. This was also an item that I had pulled, and there's a speaker on this item, and I will now ask if we can make the speaker available to be heard, and that is Ajax Woolley. Madam Clerk, could you, well, let me do this first. Let me hear from the department, and then we'll make Mr. Woolley available to be heard. Sorry, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council, Reginald Johnson, Director of Department of Community Development. This item before you is a request from the Durham Housing Authority to issue tax bonds for the J.J. Henderson site. This is part of the city's ministerial duty as part of the IRS tax code, where the public body in the jurisdiction where the housing authority is issuing the bonds is required to approval of the bonds going forward after they hold a public hearing. And so this is the item. And so the department has reviewed, and we're requesting that the city council approve the housing authority's issuance of the tax bonds, tax exempt bonds. It does not have any implications to the city financially.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Madam Clerk, could you make Ajax Woolley available to be heard?
I'm here unmuted.
Thank you, Mr. Woolley. Welcome. We're glad to have you, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council and staff. I'll just be very brief. And the last time we spoke to this issue was on election eve in 2020, which I think was approximately 14,000 years ago. I wanted to just mention a couple of points that council members made at that time. Councilmember Freeman in particular had talked about how the incremental process of moving through RAD conversions and the compliance and the detailed painstaking work that goes on both within the housing authority and among community orgs relates to outcomes for residents. And I just wanted to bring to your attention a report that was shared. Durham Can and others have been in conversation with the housing authority, looking for ways to collaborate, cooperate. And there's a report on the J.J. Henderson residents that have moved as part of this project. And I wanted to bring it to council's attention and make sure that it was something that either had been reviewed by council members or that you at least had it on your radar to have a look at, because I think it speaks to the need for really detailed, focused attention ongoing around the issue of relocation as we move through RAD conversion projects. So just read one sentence from the report and then close with that. So it speaks to the sort of timeline and the experiences the residents faced as the property was handed over to new ownership. And the sentence reads, obviously, this scenario was unique to the JJ time constraints and the less than ideal arrival of the RCC, which is the RAD conversion commitment. As this was the first RAD deal of this type, it has provided us with valuable lessons learned if we ever find ourselves in this situation again. And then it goes on to detail the status of the families, et cetera. And I just want to make a plea once again to council that I think we in the community are clear that we will face this situation again. And we appreciated the report. We appreciate the conversations we're having both with council and with the housing authority. And we just like to raise it up and bookmark it for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Woolley. Mr. Woolley, I haven't seen that report. I'm not saying it didn't come into my inbox, but I don't remember it and would appreciate receiving it. And just to just to make clear, today's item is related to that because it is J.J. Henderson, but this is not about the renovation of J.J. This is about the new construction on that same property, but would very much appreciate getting that report. And you're absolutely right. The way in which people are relocated through these RAD conversions is going to be absolutely critical. Other comments, colleagues? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Woolley. Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, and actually Councilmember Freeman had her hand raised before me.
Okay, sorry, you guys. Go ahead, Councilmember Caballero, and then Councilmember Freeman.
I just had
you folks.
I appreciate the comments as well and would like to see the report as well. And I know this is about new construction. In the I guess summary document on the public hearing, there was some discussion on the fact that lots of folks have showed up and that there was a limitation on the Zoom license. And so was just curious if that had been upgraded so that the next meeting would be able to be open or more open to the community. And secondly, I'm eager to hear more about the relocation and wondering if we can get, not today, but some more information, because I'm also hearing about folks taking the vouchers, and right now it's really hard to find that level of housing because rents are so high. And so what is DHA advising folks that it may, what's their process around that? And I know that that's not what this issue is about, but I do want to hear more about it at some point.
Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I also wanted to just put a pinpoint and acknowledging that there are some reports out about residents being displaced from JJ Henderson. And I know that the concern was raised and I didn't have a response because I'm not that close to the project, but I do want to make sure that that representatives from Durham Housing Authority have a chance to kind of explain exactly how that work is happening, and if they are explaining it in other places, to at least direct folks there, because I feel like there's a lot of people who are familiar with Durham Housing Authority and their processes who are complaining about what's happening and how it's working, and I just want to make sure that the communication is clear between the two.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just forwarded the report about the JJ Henderson relocation to the council email address from DHA. The specific situation that led to the problem is that JJ Henderson was originally restricted for only seniors and disabled people, and in 2017 that distinction expired, and so a number of people who were not over the required age or with a disability moved into the property, and then the designation was renewed. And so that led to a number of families who had lived in JJ Henderson who were not going to be able to live there after the renovation because it was then going to be renewed as a senior property. And I think there were 9 residents or families who were impacted and who were offered either a voucher or relocation to another DHA property. Unfortunately, some of the folks who chose the vouchers had trouble finding voucher housing due to our ongoing housing crisis, and a lot of landlords who still are not able to take vouchers and weren't able to find places that they could afford. So 4 of the 9 residents were assisted by DHA with hotel housing, and then with housing at other DHA properties. I think one moved to Daymar, another one is back in JJ Henderson temporarily. So I believe at this point, all of those residents have been assisted back into housing, but there were 9 families who were impacted by this problem, and DHA has been assisting them for the last several months to try to find them a permanent place. But the details in the report are in everybody's inboxes now. And the relocation, the professional relocation company that's been working with DHA is working on a plan to ensure that this kind of situation is avoided in the future, and also making sure it's important to make sure to communicate to residents clearly how difficult it is to find housing with a voucher, that a voucher doesn't just mean you get an apartment, that a voucher means you now have to go out and search, and just how crowded that marketplace is and how difficult it's going to be to find voucher housing.
Thank you. That was a great explanation, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Super helpful. Also want to note that 20 of the units that we are talking about today of the 80 are units that are going to be for people in public housing who can move to these new units once they are constructed under the RAD conversion. So this is the kind of thing that will help us with that displacement, which is great. New housing, new affordable housing. I like new affordable housing. All right. Other comments? Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. Just a follow-up, and the new housing, and I know this is always in the weeds, just acknowledging that a 1-for-1 kind of alternative, is that also being made available, acknowledging that I know you said 4 families, so I'm assuming that's more than one person in a household. And if there's only a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom when folks need 4 bedrooms, is that also being addressed?
I'm actually not sure about the details on family size. I know that a 1-to-1 replacement is required by the RAD program. So if folks had chose to be relocated, that would to another DHA property, that would be required. People who chose to take vouchers, I think it's up to them more. Like they're not being explicitly relocated by the company. But I'm happy to check in with the DHA for those details and get back to y'all about it.
And just one additional, do you know, I'm assuming you know who the company is that's delivering this messaging, because I feel like that might be where some of the issue is as well.
Why don't we hear from Mr. Scott?
Yeah, great.
Mr. Scott.
Good
I think you've been
afternoon,
listening in
everyone.
on this conversation, and
I
you have
have.
been, I know that your knowledge has been ably represented by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Excellently represented, actually.
But can you answer Councilmember Freeman's question about the relocation in terms of family size?
Correct. So the relocation for replacement units is based on family size. So if you have a 1-bedroom unit, we're looking to replace that with another 1-bedroom unit. And then, of course, in the case of JJ, you have either studios or 1-bedroom apartments. There are no larger units than that. So the 9 families that were impacted by this, and you're corrected, one family did age up. That is, they turned 62 during this whole process. So now they're back at JJ, and that will be their permanent housing. And the other 8 are being relocated to units that are appropriate for their family size. So that's at least a 1-bedroom, because that's the max that we had at JJ.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And if I could, the reason why in the report it talked about if this issue would occur again is that JJ is unique in that we are renovating with people in place. So unlike the other sites that are being renovated or are actually being redeveloped, JJ is the only one that's being renovated. So that's why this situation was more unique. And as you pointed out, it was a senior site. Initially, wasn't, now goes back to senior. So we don't have that situation that is likely to happen again. And of course, the most important thing is, the communication. And those are the things that will make sure that we are doing a better job in coordinating with the relocation company and DHA. And if something close to this happened again, that communication is happening much more frequently with any impacted family.
And as I mentioned, just noting who the communication should be occurring with would be helpful.
Correct.
So who the relocation company is. And then just another note around family size, acknowledging that often there are folks who are over 62 that do end up taking in a child. I just want to make sure that those adjustments are also accounted for.
Correct. What we're required to do is provide the housing for the family based on their qualified family size that they have in place at that time. So even if they are 62 and they have 3 people living at home, then we have to accommodate them based on their family size at the time that we engage in any redevelopment. And the company, and maybe Anthony Snell, by the way, who is our new director of development, he might be able to respond to what the name of the company is, but I know it's a company based out of Charlotte. They've worked with DHIC with relocation before. They work with Charlotte Housing Authority, so they're very experienced at this type of work, but I cannot recall their name off the top of my head, so I apologize for that.
Why don't you send that to us in an email, Mr. Scott, prior to our meeting 10 days from now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you, Council Members, and thank you, Mr. Woolley, for your important comments. All right, colleagues, the next item is item 16, FY 2021 second quarter financial report, and I pulled this item. And I believe I see Mr. Boyd.
Good afternoon, David Boyd, Finance Director.
Mr. Boyd, good to see you. I have several questions, and I can't say that they're in, and I see Mr. Allure as well. I'm not sure that these questions, I'll just ask them in the direction that they, in the order in which they came to me. First, it has to do with the solid waste fund, which is the personnel is approximately $600,000 over budget. I can imagine why some of the reasons why that might be this year, but I was wondering if someone could address that.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Allure as he wants to comment, because I don't believe anybody from solid waste is on.
Okay. Mr. Allure, do you know, or is that something
They
we can
certainly
ask
are.
solid waste?
Sorry, good afternoon.
Go ahead, Mr. Allure.
Yes, John Allure, Assistant Budget Director, City of Durham. It's something that we can answer. We know, sorry, my internet is a little unstable. We know that they are going over, for obvious reasons. There's more crews out there, and that they are attempting to make that up with some savings in operating. And but overall, in looking at their financial picture over a multi-year scenario, as we do with many of the funds, that they are able to manage within their means and within the amount of fund balance that they have. So we don't see it as necessarily an immediate problem.
All right, thank you. City Manager is with us, City Manager Page. Any comments on that?
Certainly, John, answered ably. I just wanted to point out that the reason for the additional crews is directly related to the COVID pandemic and the operational changes that have had to take place, the way that service is rolled out between our regular solid waste and recycling, as well as our yard waste collections. So it is not normal. It is based upon our COVID pandemic.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but wasn't sure, and appreciate that. And I appreciate Mr. Allure's assurances that the fund balance is sufficient to help us with that, to deal with that. My next two questions, I think, are for Mr. Boyd, which is how are we covering the shortfall in the parking fund and the DPAC fund? They both have very, very significant COVID-related impacts, and just would like for you to address the stability of those funds and our ability to cover those losses.
Sure.
Or those shortfalls.
I'll start with the easy one. The DPAC fund has accumulated a significant amount of fund balance that we have been accumulating to pay for future capital needs. So in the short term, we have no problem with covering that shortfall within the DPAC fund without the need for any additional external resources. The parking fund, however, is a bigger concern. I haven't seen the full year-end projections to know where we're going to end with total fund balance, but we had some funds going into this fiscal year, and it will be close as to whether or not we'll have enough to cover this fiscal year. And as I mentioned last week at the budget retreats, the parking fund is definitely something we're going to need to discuss and figure out how we're going to deal with that for next year. Because with no one parking, as you can see, the revenues are just not able to cover all the costs there. So more to come on the parking front in a larger conversation.
Great, thank you for that. My next question is, I noticed that I love reading in these reports through the CIP projects and seeing the status of those projects. I noticed one was the MRF permitting application under solid waste. The MRF permitting application was completed. I wasn't sure exactly what that meant in terms of next steps, or if I really understood that correctly. This is not exactly and this could be a question that someone could send me in an email or something like that. But I'm interested in what the next steps on that on that MRF facility are. I'm very excited about the potential for that project. So anyone want to comment on that, or would you all just rather send me? I see again the city manager's here.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we would first like to say we'd like to send you additional information, when staff is available. But what I can say is that this is primarily, professional services and design services.
Yeah.
So we would not have, at this point, information about, projected development, investment type cost. What we have done so far is had the council approve for us the professional services that are moving us in the direction of having that MRF. But we
Great.
can certainly provide additional details.
Yeah, if there's any more, I know that you're very early days, but thank you so much. That would be great. All right, my next question relates to the transit fund. And if I read this correctly, it looks like that we were able to basically, when I look at that fund, there are $12 million in taxes that usually go there or would have gone there this year. But it looks like that revenue was replaced essentially by the federal funding related to COVID relief. Is that true? Is that did I get that right, Mr. Allure?
You are looking at that correctly, yes.
Well, the revenue for the taxes is still there, but in addition to that, we also got the federal grant revenue.
So yeah, we got the tax revenue, but it looked to me. So what happens? It looks like. Let me put it another way. The way I read this, we didn't need to use that tax revenue.
So it is accumulating in the transit fund right now.
Okay. All right. So it'll be there as a reserve in the transit fund at this point.
At this point, that's where it is, and until we intentionally move it somewhere else, that's where it will stay. Okay,
great. All right, thanks. That was that question. And then could you all, one of you all, whoever is most suited for this, give me a refresher on the allocation of the impact fees? We've got I'm always interested in looking at the various zones and how different they are in terms of the impact fee collections. We've got quite a lot of dollars in at least one of the zones related to street impact fees, and I think our total impact fee collections now I think we're sitting on about $31 million. And I know is the allocation, are they simply allocated into the CIP projects through the CIP process? Is that what happens?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Yes, it's deemed another funding source among many funding sources within the CIP. Certainly, we were encouraged by the acceleration of collections, the rate of collections this year, and that speaks to the amount of development, which we certainly spoke at last week in the retreat. But it becomes a factor, one of many funding sources for CIP projects, such as streets, recreation projects, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I couldn't remember if there was some other way in which that got used, but that's what I needed to know. Thank you. All right, colleagues, any other questions on the report? Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I get someone to explain to me exactly what Exhibit 4 is showing? That is on slides, pages 13 and 14 of the report.
Bear with me as I scroll down there.
That's payments made for liability claims.
Sure. So as part of our risk retention fund, we're self-insured for general liability claims up to $1 million per claim. So we are sharing with you those payments that were made during the quarter to cover liability claims against the city. Some of them are are claims that are ongoing. So perhaps legal fees associated with an ongoing claim, or a payout for, if we ran over somebody's mailbox, or, backed into a car or something like that. Payments to individuals for damages that they've sustained that were the fault of the city.
So this doesn't, so all, it's, what I'm hearing is if I see a name and amount on this list, that doesn't mean that that whatever incident triggered that particular payment, it doesn't mean that that's done. It could just be some ongoing expense due to litigation or something else.
Correct. These are just payments for claims during this time period.
Great. That was the question I was getting at. Thank you. Appreciate it, David. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. But I think Councilmember Freeman has raised her virtual hand. I don't know if she meant that for this time or last time.
Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Councilmember Reese. I just wanted to, I had two questions, but I wanted to follow up on Mayor Schul's question about the funding coming out of general fund for solid waste. Is that the same thing for parking? So whatever the shortages is that all coming from the general fund?
No, so the shortfall in the solid waste fund is being covered by funds that have accumulated in the solid waste fund.
Okay.
The parking fund is going to exhaust all of its own resources, and we are going to have to find additional funding to help out the parking fund for the future.
We'll need that help. And you mentioned that the ballpark and DPAC, and there was one other.
The DPAC fund has sufficient funds of its own to cover its shortfalls this year, and the ballpark also has sufficient funds within its own accumulated funds to deal with its current situation.
So if this were to become a multi-year situation, can you give just a rough guesstimate of where we might end up in year 2 of that kind of happening if we have to just use the funds to cover the shortfall?
Well, it's going to vary by fund and magnitude. So it's a little difficult to answer that question. We'd have to have a conversation about each specific fund and the amount of resources that each fund has. And because we have, similar to the general fund, has a multi-year financial plan. We have multi-year financial plans for all of our funds. So we'd have to look at each of them individually to see, what do we have right now? What's the magnitude of future revenues and expenses to be able to help with that.
And if I could make that request to get something in that format that looks specifically at each fund over the multiple years and kind of comparison, because acknowledging that the personnel side is different from kind of lost revenue, and that kind of, unless we're not having a conversation about cutting jobs in that area yet, but if we're not paying attention to it, it's possible that could come up.
I would certainly add that Section 3 of the budget has all of the funds, the major enterprise funds, with a multi-year component over a 5 to 6 year horizon, and that will certainly be updated for the manager's presentation on May 17th.
And Mr. Allure, maybe you could go ahead and forward that section from last year's budget to us in an email. That would be helpful, so we could see.
Yeah, and just noting for Section 3, even if it just splits out personnel from revenue.
Madam Manager.
I was about to just add one point about the multi-year, needs, and why we're constantly updating our multi-year projections. We didn't mention it today in this meeting, but I believe Ms. Boyd has mentioned it in the past. When we did the refunding this year, that refunding, because of the conditions that occurred, made our negative impact on the parking fund less negative. I know we've mentioned it before, but I just wanted to bring it up as an example of how we're constantly refining all of the multi-year projections, and sometimes conditions, cause those things to be different.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Boyd or Mr. Allure?
I did have one more, but it escaped me right at that at this point. But I will circle back around this before the
All right.
days.
You can always send them an email prior to next Monday. All right, Mr. Allure and Mr. Boyd, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Okay, we're now moving to item 22, and Madam Mayor Pro Tem pulled this item, and that is the supplemental item, interlocal agreement regarding the emergency rental assistance. Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had some questions about this interlocal related to some concerns I've heard in the community about the speed at which the county is processing requests for rental assistance, that there have been some delays in the program and that it's been difficult for residents to access. And I know there's some folks from social services who are available to talk a little bit about the program and how things have been going, and want to thank them for being here on short notice. And thank you, Reginald.
You're welcome, Mayor Pro Tem Reginald Johnson, Director, Department of Community Development. We do have Mr. Ben Rose, who is Director of the Durham County Department of Social Services on the call, and he'll be able to at least initially respond to your question.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose.
Madam Clerk, and maybe Madam Clerk, why don't you also make Janine Gordon available to be heard, because Ms. Gordon may also want to respond. I think that she's here with Mr. Rose. Mr. Rose, welcome.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invite. And yes, Ms. Gordon is here with me as well too. I appreciate the feedback. We have definitely been learning a lot of lessons over this past year as we have been handling these emergency programs that have kind of come to us very quickly. The two big ones, of course, that we have dealt with is the one that we do have had with the city currently, which is the Community Development Block Grant CV funds. And the other program that we currently have ongoing that we're continuing to administer is the HOPE program. The HOPE program was a little different in the sense of how it came about. It was there was a portal for that for people to apply for services through the 211 system, and DSS kind of became the back end of the processing of the applications and then getting the checks out. So HOPE was a little different. The CV program was a little more the traditional program that we have been used to administering, like we do our eviction diversion and so forth. So these programs have definitely taught us a lot about how to manage these funds and to try to efficiently get them out. We've heard the concerns too about the efficiency. One thing I would point out is with these funds, there is a lot of income verification and documentation that we have to secure to be compliant with the funds that we are receiving, because these funds are definitely subject to audit. So I think that process is not always an easy process. We do have times where households and clients that are applying for services will not respond and provide information timely. So we have to pin the application. There are a lot of barriers and things that definitely play a part into that. However, I think we've done a pretty good job working through those processes and getting these funds out. We've spent a predominant amount of the CV funds. Most of those have been expended. And the HOPE funds, we continue to administer those funds and get those funds out the door. As we talk right now, I sign often when I go into the office, I'm signing about 60 to 100 HOPE vouchers with some large amounts. So I think, there is understand room for concern, but I do believe we have really worked to try to improve and streamline those processes. Another aspect that we're looking at for the future funds here with what's called the ERAB, the Emergency Rental Assistance, is these funds do provide us some administrative dollars to, again, continue to have temporary staff to help, because that is one thing that we need. And then we're going to hopefully be able to look at purchasing very quickly some automation and software to help both with the processing end and with the access point. That has been one obvious challenge with access. Working in a COVID type of world, we have different services and DSS altogether right now. We're contactless in many ways. And the HOPE program did give us that 2-1-1 advantage. So we're trying to kind of create that portal with these ERAP funds by looking at some software. We've actually, and Janine is here, she can talk a little more to the software, but we've been looking at three demonstration projects, and we're hoping to make decisions this week about purchasing some software equipment that will allow for easier access to online applications. Another goal that we have with these funds is to partner with some nonprofit agencies to look at improving access, especially in those communities where the access and disparities and equities are not always where they need to be. So we're trying to increase access in those communities as well. So we're looking to partner with some nonprofits perhaps to provide portals of entry to these funds. We're going to be targeting these funds at 50% AMI and targeting them at people that have not received benefits already through the HOPE program or through the CV program, so that hopefully we can help these funds get to people that have not received that assistance yet and prevent them from having a housing issue. Another positive thing that happened is the Chief District Court Judge Evans has actually put out an order to hold off on eviction hearings. So we have bought some time that I think will help us get this program up and going and functioning as well. That coupled with a lot of outreach, I believe we can do a good job in getting these funds out to the community fairly efficiently. I'll let Ms. Gordon follow up with anything I said. She may want to follow because she's more in the day-to-day management of it and can speak more about the efficiencies as well too. So I'll turn it over to Janine for a minute.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I appreciate being here this afternoon. And I really want to address Mayor Pro Tem's concerns about timeliness. I think that having that pain point brought to our attention, not just here, but in other areas is one of the reasons why we kind of pulled together a group to really figure out how can we go from application to payment in the shortest amount of time possible. That's really why we're trying to pull together a group of landlords to work with in the most efficient way, pulling in community members to help us help those individuals who may have language barriers or access barriers or fear barriers to have access to these applications as quickly and efficiently as possible, and to have a data management tool like Director Rose spoke of that is actually integrated into our systems to be able to try and get that approval process as fast as we can. We did have challenges during the HOPE program about getting all the documentation, but hopefully when we get our data agreement with several other entities, including hopefully with the state, we can get all of those documentation that we uploaded to the state's portal to be able to have access to that so that we can move forward already with that documentation in place. So we have some strategies in place to try to really streamline that process down. I know there were other questions, so.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon, and thank you, Mr. Rose. Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it would be helpful to get some information about how long it's taking now from when people apply for them to actually receive assistance, because I don't actually have any data. I have, some people have communicated to me some concerns, but I don't know the specifics. So if it's possible before our meeting to get some specific information about how long it's taking people from when they apply to actually get funding, and how long it's taken to get the first batch of funding out the door, I think that would be helpful. And I'd like us to consider potentially doing sending some of this funding to the county, but also supporting other organizations in the community that do similar work. I know there are some immigrant funds that focus on immigrant residents who were ineligible for who have been ineligible for stipends, and helping those folks with assistance. I know that Legal Aid is distributing Hope funds for a number of counties out of their office in Raleigh. So I think there are some options for us if we didn't want to move forward with doing moving the whole 8 million to the county, that we could put part of it into the county's program and also support some other local local initiatives. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there staff that would like to comment on that before we move to other questions by members of the council?
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor. One of the things we did look at was going the nonprofit route. And that's going to, one, we do have to be careful about procurement and how do we decide on which organizations that we need to participate with, which will lengthen the process. We already have this money, but we need to, just waiting on Treasury to issue additional guidance on getting it out. That's one of the reasons, as we outlined in the memo, that we wanted to partner with the DSS, because they already have a good portion of the infrastructure already in place. And if we, start looking at others, then we will also have to build that infrastructure, which has some complexities to it that we have to balance. So I would just offer that as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Madam Mayor Pro Tem, any other questions before we move on? Another person.
Nope. Yeah, I would just appreciate hearing other folks' thoughts and ideas. It seems like DSS is, working to improve their infrastructure, but I am concerned that it seems that right now it's not working very well, and people are in a crisis now, and it's taken a really long time to get that first batch of money out the door. Even if we were to, move half of it to, to the county, it would take a number of months to actually distribute that funding. And during that time, we could be putting out an RFP for other sources. I'm not sure that splitting it up would actually functionally slow it down, but definitely a lot to consider.
Thank you. Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, I have several questions, and I appreciate, I've had these conversations with community development folks, and I think they were having some conversations with some of our refugee resettlement organizations and folks who provide assistance within the immigrant communities, because I very much consistently hear that people are very resistant to going to DSS for a myriad of reasons. And this issue keeps coming back. It came last summer when we got the original CDBG money. I'd like to hear from DSS. So what I thought I just heard was you all got a little bit over $1 million of rental assistance, I think in August, and that money still hasn't been fully spent down. So that's one question I have. And so if I'm not mistaken, in the memo, it says we have until the end of 2021 to get those funds distributed. And so if we haven't gotten the initial little bit over $1 million distributed in these many months, what is the plan to get a much larger amount of money out into the community? I'd like to understand what the length of the application is. I'd like to know if people can self-certify on income. I know that was a question that it didn't seem like we were going to be able to do that, but I wanted to have some confirmation on that. I wanted to understand, a lot of our folks aren't on formal leases. So what's the process around that? And then finally, if we do have some administrative money, we've learned this with COVID, this idea of navigators through a process. I have, had to use Medicaid, I've had to use food stamps, and it is a pain. It is a lot of information. I have a college degree and speak 2 languages. So if it's hard for me, then I know it's hard for a lot of folks. And we don't have the time with the eviction crisis. We've got to make our stuff easier for people. And that burden is on us. It's not on the people who are coming to get services. So I'd like to hear a little bit about the length of the application, and then what is the plan, because it needs to be aggressive, around getting $8 million out into the community.
All right. Mr. Rose or Ms. Gordon, would you all like to comment?
Yeah, I'll start off, and then I'll let Janine wrap around with a couple of those as well too, especially with strategies going forward. I think one issue that happened with the CV funds is the HOPE funds came available, and we had to get those spent by the end of December. So we diverted away from CV and really focused on HOPE during the months of October, November, December, and into January. And we're still, getting the HOPE funds out. So I think that's one reason why there's still some CV dollars probably on the table. And I definitely hear you about we've had that conversation before about the concerns about coming to DSS and navigating DSS. That's one reason why I think we really wanted to focus on some community partners for this process, to really places where residents would feel comfortable going, because they may not feel comfortable coming to DSS, and they could go there and make that application and start to get access to those services based on the partnerships that we establish. I think the city was really interested in doing that, and we were as well too. I think we need to definitely work on creating, ease of access. That is one reason why we wanted to look at potentially the software package, because these companies have built these software packages especially for these rental assistance. They're trying to make it an ease of applying and an ease of getting the application in. The applications themselves with ERAP are based on what ERAP demands. You're right in terms of, it does not appear that we're going to have to verify income. We're going to have to verify leases and so forth. There is a little bit of flexibility. It seems that may be coming. The guidance, unfortunately, is still being written for ERAP, because when you had to change in the administration on January 20th, they have now come in and they're actually still updating the guidance. So we do not have full and final guidance, even with the emergency rental assistance program at this point. We're looking for it daily, but obviously there are some guiding principles that are there for it. But yes, we're not going to be able to self-certify income. We're going to have to verify income, which is one reason why a system would definitely help us there. Janine, would you like to address the length of time issue and what you're seeing with the current use of funding there?
Well, our current use of funding outside of the HOPE program, because the HOPE program is a little bit outside of our sphere of influence. Our traditional ability to move money in 5 to 7 business days is our typical model, right? I mean, we have people come in, we're able to turn it around with documentation with 2 or 3 days, and then we can cut a check. And that's, kind of what we're hoping for as the ideal, to be able to push those dollars out within that 7 to 10 business days. So that is our kind of our benchmark that we're going for, because we don't want people to have to wait months, as Mayor Pro Tem indicated, like has happened with one of our other larger programs, that we identified that was a huge problem. The other that you had identified, Chair Caballero, was the ability to reach individuals who have not yet been reached due to documentation status, language, those items that or even refugee status. And that's one of the things that we've already started with the partnership with the city, to reach out to those groups to make sure that with a mobile access application, that they definitely do not need to darken the door of DSS. They do not have to set foot in DSS. They can do this completely with a navigator that we are looking at partnering with nonprofits with, so that they can, with the help of someone that they trust and they know, can complete that application, can easily get whatever the documentations are. We are trying to really figure out a way, although the income is kind of the most stringent one, we're trying to work out how to get lease agreements in place that don't jeopardize the placement of the person. That's really important to us. So, we're still working out how to make all of this work for all of our residents, because having safe and stable housing, we know, is a huge driver of health. And it's a huge driver of our economy. And that's why this is such a priority for our partnership with the city, to ensure that every resident has a place to reside.
Councilmember Caballero, any other questions or comments at this time?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Councilmember Freeman?
Thank you. I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Caballero's questions and the responses that were shared. I do feel like that the sentiment is still not being heard, in that there should be a task force in place to address this specific issue, acknowledging just how hard it has been for folks to find the resource and then to use the resource in place, acknowledging not only are the language barriers or documentation issues a factor for people who are citizens of this country. With documentation, it's also been a barrier, and I'm hearing the stories of folks who just haven't seen a response at all. And so I really would love to have some process in place to track what's happening, because I don't feel really confident in how the operations have been going since August of last year and then up until now. I will note that I acknowledge that when we do divert to community partners, that there are administrative fees, and that's less dollars going out the door. And so I'm mindful that it's probably best to move forward with the DSS, but I do want to make sure that acknowledging I'm also submitting I've submitted a resolution today to make sure that we're moving forward to ask for more funds to become available in the future. As funds are available, I would like to see the Community Development Department actually look at how to set up the infrastructure to do the work, to make sure that funds do go out the door with whether it's through city staff or a community partner or what have you, but something has to be done to make it a lot more simpler. I feel like the DSS system is not set for this, and we're trying to make it fit. And they're doing it as best as they can. I don't begrudge Ms. Gordon or Ms. Rose. I know that they've been, spending countless days and nights trying to address all the needs of the county and including the city. And so it's overwhelming, and I don't think that it should sit just with the two departments in the county. I do think that there should be constant conversations, and I would like to be a part of those conversations. I do know that I sit in a very different position in a nonprofit organization that serves a predominant cross-section of Spanish speakers who are often undocumented. And there are so many families, that stories, I can't even tell you of people who are facing such disparate impact in COVID. And this is not just a solve the problem kind of issue. It's really like, these are the issues that were there before, and now's the chance to actually do something different and figure out how to move us forward from this so that we don't return to what was. Because I can tell you, people don't have leases. They don't have documentation for income, and they're managing as best as they can from where they are. And we're not coming up with solutions that are going to address the marginalized, the most marginalized in this community. And it feels very underwhelming. I'm saying all that, acknowledging always, first and foremost, this is not something that sits at the feet of the county or of the Community Development Department. It's something that we as a council and as a community have to figure out how to get behind and grapple with, because these are the people in our community we're saying that we want to help. And the help is just not there. So the dollars are there and they're not moving. And there's this bottlenecking that keeps occurring. And it's not just with this, it's with so many other programs. And so I want to be really clear in saying that I think that this should be something that is set as a task force that has many hands and ears at the table, both at the community level and elected level, as well as staff, because it's not something that staff is going to be able to cover by itself.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose.
Yes. If I could,
Mr. Rose, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You all have received the city CDBG funding and the HOPE funding. Can you give me an estimate of approximately the total amount of rental assistance money that you all have had in those programs to allocate during this time?
yes. So, and Janine, I'm going to ask Janine to help me with the exact figures, because I'm going to give you estimates. I don't have anything in front of me.
Yeah, estimates are fine.
The CD funds, I believe, were about 1.1 million, I believe, in that allocation with no admin funds. So we did prop those funds up with our current staff. And HOPE funds, we did receive an additional allocation of HOPE funds due to the amount of applications that came through when they first opened up the program with 211. And I believe total there, it's around 6 million that is going out to clients.
So in all, you've had around $7 million.
A little over 7 million, yeah.
Yeah. And how much of that money can you estimate has actually gone out the door at this point?
Janine, help me with this. I know I haven't seen the most recent HOPE number, so I'm gonna rely on Janine because she manages
Sure.
that daily.
Yeah,
I signed the vouchers, but I don't add them up.
Yeah, Ms. Gordon.
I know roughly what the DSS portion of the Durham County applications are. The state took some of those applications to process at the state level with state terms and state dollars, which were different than the counties. So that makes it a little bit tricky. I know that we received approximately 2,700 applications. We at the county level processed over 1,800 of those applications and have put out almost I think it was right around $3 million. And the CDBG CV funds have now been exhausted. So that would push us over 4 million out of the 7.
And are the other 3 million, so it sounds like, let me see if I'm understanding correctly. You still have some 900 applications to process, and there's still $3 million roughly remaining of the HOPE funds. Is that right?
We have processed every application that we were left with.
I see. So those others go with the state.
Correct.
Does the $3 million that remains, is that the state is processing those, or are you all, I mean, those dollars, or are you all?
Those actually go out of the state funds. They are not
Okay.
coming out of the county funds, which makes it a little bit difficult for me to say because I don't have access to that
Understood.
information.
Well, what I guess I'm hearing then is that you all received the HOPE funds when?
October 15th.
And you've now exhausted all of the local applications and all of the local funds that you have to give out through the HOPE funds.
Correct.
Okay. So that's important information to me. And I appreciate receiving that. When were the HOPE funds exhausted? Is that recent?
We stopped processing the applications on the 31st of January, which was the deadline that we were given. We were only open for 26 days, which meant that we had to process those 1,800 applications between the 15th of November and the 31st of January. And we had to work within the process set by the state. So, yeah.
So between the 15th of November and the 31st of January, you processed approximately 1,800 applications and exhausted the locally available HOPE dollars.
Well, 3 million, yes.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, all right. Other questions or comments, colleagues? Councilmember Freeman?
Thank you. Of the 1,800 applications, can you say how many other applications were not processed or were not moved forward?
So all applications were processed. All 2,700 applications were processed. Not all of them were approved. But out of the 2,700, we know over 2,200 of them were approved based on the data that the state has provided us for their applications, as well as those that we've processed. So we know approximately 500 applications out of the 2,700, roughly, were not approved. Now, whether that is because the landlord wouldn't agree to take the money or the application wasn't completed, that level of minutia I do not have at this time, but it was a dual part application, just as this one moving forward is as well. But that's why we've already started our landlord engagement process.
And if I could ask if there were a possibility to get into the minutia, what that might look like as in a form of support. Could you spell that out?
Could you be a little clearer about your question?
So if you were to ask for help on being able to dig into the weeds of why some of the applications are not being approved, because I feel like there's quite a few folks that I know that have raised the issue about not hearing back from DSS on an approval. What would it look like to kind of track back through, because those families still need help?
Absolutely. If you were approved, you would have already received your letter from the HOPE program. In fact,
and if you weren't approved,
right? Typically, you're already going to get a letter from the HOPE program, whether that's at the DSS level or the state level, about where you are along the process, including whether you've been approved or whether you have not been approved.
and the not approved folks, you just vanish into thin air?
They do not vanish into thin air. We still have their application. Should something have changed while the process, the HOPE program was open, that could have potentially changed. Unfortunately, the HOPE program was only open for 26 days.
Ms. Gordon, did you say that people whose application is not approved also receive communication?
Yes.
So if you're not approved, you hear that you're not approved. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And is there any tracking on that so that there's a way to come back and say, so for someone who may have been a non-English speaker and they received a letter in English, that we could at least track back to say that this is what you should have received?
So all the documentation would have come from Salesforce, which is the data keeping tool that the state used. Now, whether it was in English or Spanish or not, I'm not certain that they were able to be multilingual like our program will be.
Yeah, and then just noting, so not much of that information will end up in like the NC Cares 360 platform either.
Not much of that information?
I mean, all the Salesforce talk specifically to NC Cares 360.
It is not connected to NC Care 360, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Colleagues, other questions or comments at this time? Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, I had one final question. With the data that is collected, and this is to and you brought this out, Ms. Gordon, around the fear component. There is a lot and legitimate fear around the public charge issue for folks with, depending on their immigration status. Do you have any sense of that, how that's going to be handled? What should we be able to tell folks once this thing, if we approve this item as a council and DSS is managing it? What are the conversations you all have had about that?
I can tell you the early guidance has shown that this will not be a public charge issue. Reginald can follow up on that. I have not seen any new guidance to contradict that. So I don't think that is an issue. So it's a matter then of how we message and get that message out for people not to have that fear that this will come back to hurt them for other potential public benefits or any other situation they may face. Is that what you're seeing still, Reginald, that there's no impact of public charge here?
Mr. Johnson, you are
muted. Yes, that's what we're seeing so far. To that, I would just add that, and I appreciate the conversation that we've had about the HOPE program, which was complex and controlled and managed by the state. And we were aware in community development because we had initially put our funds in a community development block grant funds with the DSS, and then HOPE funds came into existence, which has a tighter timeline and a more structured demands from the state. And the part that I would want to share is one that we in community development have to be sensitive to, is the regulations that come with the funding and the timing that comes with the funding, and how we're able to get that out. It's quite frankly very complex. I spent many hours along with our team, trying to get to even to this point, because we do have the money in our possession, but we do need to ascertain a way to get it out most efficiently and effectively. And so one of the things that we're looking at in doing this is a little different from the previous two allocations, is to have an outreach effort. That's the part we're doing research on. Still need to get guidance from the Treasury Department, but we're trying to come up with some backup plans to even touch with approach the language challenges as well as the cultural challenges in terms of outreach. And so we're looking at that, as we shared in the memo. But in some respects, we're working on this as we are developing the process, recognizing that the need is there today, and that we're trying to meet it. So it is challenging, it is complex, but I think we have a plan to be able to move forward.
Mr. Johnson, in the memo, there's a paragraph that says, in addition, the city is researching the ability to contract directly with one or more nonprofit providers to provide support for individuals who may face barriers such as language, education, or technology access to applying for assistance. If possible, the city intends to pay for these contracts with ERAP funds that can be utilized for case management. If upon further guidance from Treasury, this is not an option, then the city may use dedicated housing funds to support the effort.
Yes, sir.
Is that still live? Is that still a goal of the department to partner with one or more of these nonprofit providers?
Yes, that is a goal that we have. We actually were talking with purchasing just yesterday, the day before yesterday, in terms of how we are able to do that in the time frame. That's another thing that we have to balance, because we want to have this program started probably the end of March, the middle of March, as you share in the memo, but we need to have the outreach to occur before it is released. So this is February the 18th. And so you can imagine, so it's two sets of things going on in terms of outreach. One is just to have people know about it. And so we have a plan for that in working with DSS, convening landlords, convening renters, associations, and just having a broad campaign to make people know about it. That's one piece. Then another piece is to part that we're talking about in what you just read, is to actually have people that can help other persons to be able to explain the process and help them, guide them through the process. So a bit of hand holding. That part we'll have to pay for. Because that's going to be more involved. And of course, we have to figure out how we're doing. That's the part we're researching. Of course, it involves some complexities, because if Treasury's rules, which have not been issued, mind you, say that it's a no-go, then we have to move to a plan B or C to be able to do that. But our goal and our commitment is to make it happen because it's the right thing to do. But understand that we have to also manage the complexities and the nuances of the regs and making this happen.
I didn't realize that the Treasury's rules hadn't been issued yet. That is a. Okay.
And just to be clear, Mr. Mayor, that this is a little different in this way, and this is a major difference, is that normally when we receive funds, we also have received the guidance and the rules that comes with the money. In this, we've received the money, but we have not received the rules. And we're trying to get it in place. The need is there, and people in need, but we need to be careful about how we just formulate this program. And so this is one of the things that you're hearing, in this conversation. And the reason we've made the decisions that we have, understanding we still need gaps that are filling, but we're going to fill them as quickly as we can.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, other questions, comments? Councilmember Freeman and then Councilmember Reese.
Just to follow up real quickly, just asking Mr. Johnson, if you're working with the folks in in neighborhood improvement services specifically, acknowledging that they have already folks in the community who are creating those relationships and just making sure that the connections are continued across the board, because I don't know that will carry through to the county. And if there's a way to make sure that carries through to the county, that would be really helpful.
Yes, and we've already talked with Neighborhood Improvement Services, Community Engagement. They're already on board. We've already had conversations with them about the steps that we're going to take.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the information about how the county spun up to distribute funds through the HOPE program, and understand the obstacles that they faced and the fact that there were requirements at the state level that made it take longer than I think they would have wanted. I wanted to ask one clarifying question about what happened before, and then I have a question about the proposal before us. First of all, about before, am I right in hearing that DSS estimates they've received somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 million in rental assistance funds and have only distributed, and I can't remember the HOPE number, either $3 or $4 million. Did I drop some money somewhere, or am I right about that?
No, so Durham County received an allocation, but the state is processing a portion of that allocation. So we have processed the portion that we have actually received, and then the state is processing the other 3 million that's out there.
Okay, that excuse me, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. So I guess my support for the agenda item relies pretty exclusively on whether or not DSS and the Community Development Department can deliver on what I now believe is an incredibly aggressive timeline of getting this program up and running within about 4 to 6 weeks. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, I don't have a good sense of how long it would take to fund alternate methods to get this money into our residents' hands for their very real rental assistance needs today. That would be if they're able to get it faster, then we're going to have to live with whatever DSS and community development come up with, and y'all just have to know that our community is desperate for this help, and whatever support we need to move into that work, whether it's allocating funds from the dedicated housing fund or whatever it is, let us know as soon as possible. But I still haven't heard anything concrete on the other branch of that, which is I've definitely heard, Reginald, you telling us that the effort to qualify a vendor to provide that service for us and to get money to them is certainly significant. There's an obstacle there. But, for example, we already have a grant funding relationship with legal aid. As far as I understand it, we're paying for a lot of things for their eviction diversion program. We received a letter from legal aid not long ago that said they are perfectly capable of distributing rental assistance along the same funding pathways. So I don't really understand, unless there are some other funding, because this money is going to come from a different source, that there have to be a whole new approval process. But I would like to hear, on the one hand, do y'all really think that in 4 to 6 weeks you can spin this up and get money to the people that need it? And on the other hand, what are the real obstacles and what is the actual timeline if we wanted to try to do some other avenue to distribute this money in the community? Because my concern isn't who we give the money, what organization we give the money to. That is immaterial to me. What matters to me is that we get money in people's hands as soon as possible, because folks are suffering now. So that's the questions I have. Thank you, Reginald.
Council member, I will give you one example that stands out up front is the software system that needs to engage. So legal aid does not have the software system that we need to be able to manage this. And then, to be honest with you, having multiple software systems is a challenge to this fund, because we are charged with a duplication of benefits issue, which means that persons can't get the funding from multiple sources, but you have to have the software to do that. One of the reasons to go with DSS, and most certainly I hear the comments about DSS, is they already have part of the software in place versus going to two things. Because I just mentioned the software, but you're also going to have to pay the staff of the nonprofit to do the work, where you're not necessarily engaging in that cost from DSS or community development. which is another piece. And then we have to design our contracts. So this is the third piece to take all of that into account.
So if I could intervene here too, just to say, I would, just to be clear, we, and Janine, please help me here, but I would not claim that we have the software yet either. That's why we've been looking at demonstrations. So I'm not gonna, I want to be very transparent. We do not have the software system up and running. So that is something that is a barrier, that because, as you know, it's not easy to get this up and going, and we are relying on funds from the ERAP administrative side to help fund that potentially. And I just want to say too, just as the DSS director, I want to say that we are by no means opposed to legal aid administering these funds. I don't want you to think that we're trying to just compete and we want these funds exclusively. We want to do what's right for the community. We're here to serve our community. But if you feel these funds are better in another entity, we will not, we would support that effort, because one conversation I've already had with Karen and Reginald is legal aid obviously is a source of potential clients in need. And could that be one place that we go to first to try to get benefits to, using they're seeing the clients in need, they're dealing with them. But on the flip side, I want you to understand that we want what's best for the community. And if you feel as an entity, another agency can do it better, the DSS is typically not in this business. That's, this is definitely not our, if you look across the state, you don't find DSS is doing a lot of housing programs and rental assistance and eviction diversion. There's a few, but not many. It's usually done either in the nonprofit world or the city side of things. So we would, we're going to be team players. We want to be partners, and we will support whatever you decide. If you want to go with legal aid or with another entity, we will do all we can to support that. We have a county allocation as well. We secured about 1.2 million from the county side. So we've got that. We can look to focus on that and then support other entities if you feel that is best. I want to just be very transparent that we're here to do what's best for the community in the end.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to respond to that and say, Ben, I really appreciate you saying that. And I'm sorry if my frustration about the situation we find ourselves in led you to believe that I thought y'all were trying to give you the money. I know
not at all.
The opposite. We, the city, have come to you and said, will you please help us get this money to the people that need it? You're going to be doing this regardless, because you did, as you said, you got the $1.2 million allocation to the county. So right. we totally understand. I mean, I totally get the fact that you're doing us a favor by even negotiating this agreement with us and being willing to sit here and listen to us ask lots of annoying and frustrating questions about why the money isn't getting out faster, when you don't need that. I totally get that. So if I gave you a different impression, I apologize.
No apology necessary. I've appreciated the discussion, and look, we're sensitive to it. We understand DSS has a perception in the community that's not always positive. We try not to. We try to message a whole as being a community friendly supporting agency. But yes, we understand, and we understand there's a lot of ingrained fears with DSS even. So we're here to be partners and definitely support whatever is best for our citizens. That's what we want to do. And if it's us, then we will work our hardest to get it out. But I want to be clear. We do need the staff. We have, with the HOPE program, we had administrative funds that allowed us to hire temporary staff. Well, you can already imagine the challenges with temporary staff. They turn over quick, you lose them, you get someone in, they find a permanent job somewhere. There's nothing easy here. So if there is another entity that has a more stable situation, we want what's best for the residents. So
one more thing, Mr. Mayor, and then I'll be done. I just wanted to say how grateful I am again to DSS for partnering with us to put this plan together. Also want to thank our staff. This is not well covered territory. We're basically, as Reginald tried to say, we're building the train as it's going down the tracks, trying to make sure we actually get to the destination, and still can't figure out exactly what kind of fuel we're going to use and what shape the wheels are going to be and all the other horrible areas that this metaphor is dragging me down now that I've started using it. Anyway, but Reginald, I really, really appreciate you focusing my attention, and maybe my colleagues too, on the actual barriers to doing anything else at this point. You know, maybe next summer we can all sit down and have a post-mortem about what in future global pandemics or other situations where we find ourselves in the need. There's going to be more where we find ourselves in the need to get rental assistance to folks very quickly. Maybe 6 months or a year from now, we can come up with a post-mortem to look at what we could have done differently when it started. Should we have started qualifying multiple folks in the community that could have access to these kind of systems to distribute the money in case there were bottlenecks or other problems? But I appreciate you focusing us on the barriers to doing that today, which to me is more like the critical question we face. Also, and then I promise this is the last thing, is I just want to thank my colleagues, especially the Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Caballero and Councilmember Freeman, who have been extremely persuasive today in convincing me that we've got to do something else if it makes any sense at all at this point. I think I went into the meeting sharing and hearing from residents about their frustrations about the HOPE program and some other things about the way the funds have been distributed. But I think I would not be in the position I am right now without my colleagues having stepped up and clearly, rationally, and sometimes even with emotion, talking about how we have to do better. And I know that even if this agenda item goes forward and changed, even if on our next Monday meeting it goes forward on the consent agenda as is, even if that happens, I know that the folks who are on the call with us today, the folks from County DSS, our staff, are going to hear our urgency and the urgency that our constituents are making sure that we come into meetings like this equipped with, and we'll do everything they can for us and for our community. That's enough talking by.
Thank you, Council Member. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would just say I've definitely heard the council's concerns. I would just say I want to make one clarification. Ben is correct. We know that he does not have DSS does not have the software. We are actually going to give a portion of our money to DSS so they can make sure they have enough resources to get the software. The point that I was making was that when we talk about duplication of benefits, it also includes the CDBG CV as well as the HOPE funds, are bodies of funds that we have to do checks against for duplication of benefits. DSS already has that information versus us giving it to someone else or them giving it to someone else for them to check as well. And so I just want to be clear on that point. But I would also definitely receive the comments of the council. I would also say that the DSS did not mention that they do have a unit that does deal with public and the integrity of the application process that reviews application that's already built in. And that's something I have to be concerned about. You know, I know we talk about the need that we have to address, but I have to, as community development, we're responsible for it all. And so that's something that we also have to look at as well. And I just, want to be transparent about that also.
Can I ask a question about income verification? In the memo, you refer to the fact, Reginald, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Rose or Ms. Gordon, that the income verification, you all have a lot of, you're already income verifying for a lot of people for other programs, and that's clearly a strength that you all bring because you, but there are, I guess really this is really a question for Mr. Johnson. If there was another organization that was to administer part of this, how would income verification occur in that situation?
So that's a question that they will have to, both entities will have to do the same income verification. I know Ms. Lotto is on the line as well. So I don't know if she has any more details, but I'm not quite sure I might understand your question, that I'm not understanding your question.
I'm not sure I asked my question very well. I guess I was thinking that I'm wondering how income verification how does income verification happen? Let me put it like this. I read in the memo that one of the strengths of the social services partnerships is that there is income verification for a lot of people that's already pre-done because they know that for other programs. So somebody comes in, they're already income verified, or not everybody, but a lot of people. But I was wondering, so how does income verification happen if that's not the situation? And if another organization had, part of this money, how would income verification occur?
So
is that better?
Yes, sir. This is Karen Lotto, Assistant Director of Community Development. So that's a good question. It's one of the factors we considered because we did evaluate whether we went with a third-party partner or whether we went with the county, and the county was very transparent in saying exactly what Mr. Rose said today. They want to do what is best for the community. If right now we have been told by Treasury that we have to income verify, that we have to provide documentation for income. There was a hope that there would be a self-certification, but that has not materialized. In that case, a nonprofit that doesn't have access to the databases for Medicaid or LIHEAP that are means tested program. Our goal is to be able to use, if you're already gone through a means tested program and you're deemed eligible, we don't want to make you go through the income certification process again because that data are already there. But they would not be available. They're available to DSS, and DSS is working out how to get access to them because DSS administers those programs. They would not be available to a third party. So we would have to go, I would presume, unless we could figure out a workaround, we'd have to just go through the regular of asking people to document income. And part of this really speaks to the challenge that we have with this program, which is in order to run this program, you need a certain infrastructure. You need staff, you need a software system, you need the ability to process payments. When the HOPE program, which both DSS and legal aid rolled out, the state provided the software system. The state provided the intake actually through 211. We don't have that now. So whatever partner we go with, whether that's legal aid, whether that's DSS, has to put that infrastructure in place. No one has it outside of the state and some county programs that had already built this capacity in their own county. We don't have it in Durham, we have to build it. So any partner we work with is going to have to go through building the infrastructure. It's one of the challenges around not wanting to have multiple partners who are doing the actual application processing, because then we have to build multiple, infrastructures, and we have an enormous data reporting requirements to Treasury for this program. We need to be able to slice and dice data in lots of different ways and report it, which means we need to be aggregating that data in a way that lets us report it. So what we're trying to work with is a model where we create as user-friendly an interface as possible. So that's the back end. You apply through a web or phone portal. It gets processed on the back end that ideally you never even need to see, but that we're really trying to improve the ground game of outreach and application support, because that's what gets people over the documentation hump, the fear hump, the language hump. That is a real barrier to people applying.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that background. I know we've had this conversation before. And so I understand the pickle we're in. And I guess with the income verification, are we going to be working, it's the income and the leases for me, because it's going to just keep so many people out who need the money and they have yet to access. I mean, there are so many GoFundMe's and desperate pleas for rental assistance right now because there's very few pots for lots of folks to actually access. And when we have it, and I understand that those criteria are not being set by us, I get that they're criteria from the federal government. That needs to be communicated to people, because what's going to end up happening is that what the takeaway is at the community level is that the city or the county don't actually care. So that is one thing we need to let people understand. very loud and clear that the criteria is not being set at the local level. This is something that was handed down to us. And then as we work with landlords and as we work with folks, and this is where the navigation, exactly what you all are saying, I'm thinking about like the Greenlight app folks who are working right now to get folks vaccinated. This is exactly what they're dealing with. They're registering people. They're having to dig deep when we have these mass vaccination events. And it's a lot of work to get folks into these systems. And I think that it can be done, but it just has to be done very carefully and very well. But there's going to have to be some really, really deep dive work with residents to get them, you know, if they don't have a landlord with their lease, why don't they have a landlord with their lease? Like, let's get them on leases, let's get this figured out, or they're not going to qualify for this money. And these, at this point, these are honestly our most desperate residents, as far as, because they've gotten nothing. They didn't get checks in the mail like other folks did. They don't qualify for unemployment half the time. And so it's great that the immigration status issue and the public charge issue, like people are thinking through that, but then we still have these ridiculous barriers around income and leases that leave so many folks out of the equation, and that we have to figure that piece out. I don't know the answer. I appreciate the hard work everyone is doing to get us there. And I just want to ensure that we do the hardest piece, I think, about this.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Freeman.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Caballero running us back around to the area that I think I'm consistently going to say it again. I don't feel like we're covering, and acknowledging that this is not something that's internal to staff. And so I don't want to jeopardize any funding resource. I don't want to jeopardize any bond rating, but I do think that we all hold a position in the city that could actually support making sure that if 211 is not in place, there's a Facebook page that we're all dialed into and supportive of. Like, seriously, this is an infrastructure issue on the outside, coming from the outside in, and people don't care. They don't care about whether it's home or rap or CDBG. They don't even know. And so when we're speaking in this language, this is all internal. And yes, I believe staff comes up with the best solutions around how we can get it done as quickly as possible. But I don't think that it's on staff to come up with how we cover the folks who will fall through the gaps. That is on us. And so we have a recovery and renewal task force that hasn't had a housing component since it started. And maybe that's where we start. Maybe that's where we actually gain some ground and pulling folks together to have the conversation around specifically. We knew that the eviction issue was gonna create ripples and waves across the board for not just the renters, but for the property owners. And what are we going to do about it? It can't all come from the dollars outside. There's a parts and pieces that we could pull together to come up with solutions around if we're talking to each other. Similar to how there was a whole housing roundtable around making sure that property owners felt comfortable taking the vouchers. I don't know what happened to it. It kind of fell off my radar. I don't think there were any additional meetings, but these are the conversations where people pour in, they show up, they come out, they give solutions, and then there's no follow-up. And that's on us to keep this going or to pull it together. And the us I'm talking about specifically is council and county commissioners and any other electeds who are interested in pouring into this housing conversation, because it's not just something that staff is going to be able to cover. I did want to note that the integrity of the application process is the piece that I think internally we're focused on, but the integrity of actually making sure that people in the city are covered is the integrity piece that I'm focused on. And I don't feel like that's being heard. And so I appreciate Councilmember Reese acknowledging that point. But I do think it's incumbent upon us to come up with something better than what we're talking about right now. I'm in full support of moving forward with the interlocal agreement and getting the funds out as quickly as possible. But I do think that it begs the question of what are we gonna do in a tandem with that? And I don't feel like that solution's coming up, and this is the place to have the conversation.
Thank you, Council Member. Other comments, colleagues, or questions? Okay. Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment, which is when I hear the actual record of DSS of getting the money out the door, I think the record is good. And that I do think that it is really, there are a lot of good reasons that Mr. Johnson and Ms. Lotto said to us and that the memo contains for why this money should be at DSS. And I really appreciate Mr. Rose and Ms. Gordon's thoughtful responses about the issues that they have faced heretofore and still face, and their commitment to get this money out the door quickly. I do think that what I'm hearing from my colleagues and also from our staff is that, and read in the memo, is the necessity for working with our other community partners for outreach around this. If money's not going to be at these places because it's too complex, I get that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. But I do think that we are going, this issue of how to get the information out about, everything from what are the regulations and who sets them to how you access these funds. That's really going to be critical. And we've had a lot of discussion about that today, but just want to second that. Any other comments, colleagues? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Ms. Lotto. Thank you, Ms. Gordon and Mr. Rose. We really appreciate you all being here with us, especially for our friends from the county. We know that you all have been thrown into such a difficult position this year, and you've responded admirably, not just in, I think about the work that you all have been doing with our homeless residents, the way you all have responded to them as well, and so many other ways. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Reese.
Mayor, I heard huge amount of consensus on the move forward on this item, but I also didn't hear any other path. So I'm wondering, before we move to settle the agenda, where folks think this item ought to be on our next Monday night agenda.
You mean whether or not it should be on consent or GBA?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about that once we settle, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, we have one more item to do and then we'll settle. I will also say that when I grew up, ERAP, which is the name of this program, stood for the Economic Research Action Project of SDS. Now, a lot of you all are too young to remember SDS, Students for Democratic Society. But the objective of ERAP was to build an interracial movement of the poor.
We don't remember it, Steve, but we read about it in our history books.
Okay, great. Well, I remember it. Okay. Thank you all so much. I thought, colleague, great questions and discussion. Really appreciate it. It was challenging questions and important questions. And we'll come back to what we do with it on our agenda in a minute. But first, we have one other item, which is the attendance records, a priority item about the clerk. Madam Clerk, why don't you help us a little and let us know what you did? I know you've written to us, but just refresh us, and then we can maybe make the necessary decisions.
Great. Okay. I'd be happy to do that, Mr. Mayor and Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Some background on this issue. On February 4th, Council requested that the city clerk reach out to the members with attendance at 50% or below the standard percentage rate. And so the clerk's office, Paola Rowland, she reached out to 18 members from February 15th to the 16th. And she contacted 18, as I've said, 3 have since resigned, 2 remain non-responsive, and the 13 other members have indicated a desire to remain on their boards. Now, my question is whether council would like to continue with the virtual meeting guidelines in regard to attendance, meaning that attendance and excusals all non-attendance will be excused. Or if you want to go back to the regular attendance policies that were established prior to the virtual.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Could you just say the numbers again? Lola wrote to
18
people who
persons.
had attended less than 50% of the meetings.
Right, they were at 50% or less.
And what did she hear back?
Well, 3 have resigned and 2 have been non-responsive to emails and telephone messages, voicemails, that sort of thing. And the 13 others who have varying attendance percentages, I would say from like 30 to the 50, have indicated they want to stay on the boards themselves. And a couple of them have said they've attended virtually, but they may have gotten to the meeting late and missed roll call, or they were attending in their car, as council has had experience with. So, there are various reasons.
Yeah.
Some of them are technical.
Right. So colleagues, just to refresh, we did set a guideline, as the clerk had said, during COVID, that we weren't going to be enforcing the 50% rule. And I want to appreciate the clerk and the clerk's office for reaching out to these folks. Thank you. That was great. I'll tell you my thought, and then happy to hear everybody's. Those people that want to stay, I think, should be able to stay, especially during these situations. But anybody that is not responding to any kind of contact, emails, has not been coming to the meetings and is not responding. Apparently, there are a couple of people who are in that situation. In my mind, I think that they should not be serving, but I'm happy to hear others' thoughts. Councilmember Caballero?
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification, and maybe that I missed it, but when we had this conversation previously, I thought we had left it with we were going to ask the chairs and vice chairs of the actual boards and commissions to kind of reach out and do that soft touch, because I think what ended up happening, and I get why we did it this way, I think typically there's just an automated letter from the clerk's office, and that's what we've done historically. And I think that what I had heard from some folks is that they just got the letter, hadn't actually been contacted by their chairs until after they received the letter. And so it kind of was a surprise. And in some cases, some folks got frustrated because it was the first that they'd heard about it. So the first thing that they're hearing or seeing is they get a letter from the clerk's office, which is formal, saying, oh, you've missed 50% of the meetings and, kind of now you're in trouble. That's not necessarily the intention, but that's how it was received by some commissioners. And so if we're going to, for the folks, we had said as a council early on that during COVID times, we were going to be flexible, and then it appears then, oh, well, we weren't actually flexible. So I just want to bring that up. I think for the folks who are not responding, I think that makes sense, Mayor, what you just suggested. But I really want to rely on the staff, there's staff liaisons for a lot of our boards. There's chairs and vice chairs for a reason, and really relying on those folks and giving them clear guidance, because they're going to have a more, they have relationships with these folks that sit on these boards and commissions.
Madam Clerk?
I'd like to defer to Paola Rowland about who she contacted.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. I absolutely understand all of the feedback that we've received. I think reaching out directly to some of the commissioners and the board members was only done out of trying to get as much productivity and results and an answer as quickly as possible. When Diana, myself, and Ashley discussed it, instead of going through, the staff liaisons with the chairperson of each committee. But moving forward, I'm happy to just rely solely on those individuals to communicate anything from the clerk's office.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councilmember Freeman?
Thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Caballero's thorough covering of how unfortunate the letters were received. I also just want to note that the chairs might have updated information, and so it's probably best to make sure that that's a part of that conversation before we even make a decision about the folks who might be unresponsive, because if you're sending it to the wrong address or calling the wrong number because it was submitted on an application, 2 to 3 years ago, I just want to make sure that that step is taken. And we don't just remove someone who's I know in some of the emails or messages I've received where they said that this was the first time they'd heard anything was the letter. Just trying to make sure that we cover the bases, because there are a lot of folks that we look to engage who don't normally engage with city boards and committees, and just want to make sure we take that extra step. So thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I would like to let you know that the two individuals who are non-responsive have a 0 and a 10% attendance rate for last year.
Yeah. I guess I have a different perspective than I have been hearing from my colleagues. I think if you're on a committee or commission and you're not coming to 50% of the meetings, you know you signed up for it. And, you know, this is not a, you know, people have to take some of the responsibility for themselves. I have no patience for people who are attending no meetings or 30%. And it's a duty that you sign up for. And I know that our commissions and chairs and clerks and liaisons have made a tremendous effort to get people to attend, and, you know, now reaching out to people with emails and letters. And I don't know, for those people that aren't meeting the attendance requirements and now have been, you know, the clerk's office has gone the extra mile and contacted them and they want to continue to serve, that's great. They should continue to serve. But anybody that hadn't responded by this point and is attending very few meetings should not be serving. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I think that it would be fine to give everybody a period of time by which they have to respond to the clerk if they haven't attended and haven't responded, and then send them a removal letter. I agree, it doesn't make sense for someone who hasn't shown up for a year and also isn't responding to our contacts to stay on. I also would support continuing the virtual meeting attendance requirements so that no one is getting automatically removed from a board for low attendance, that we continue the process of having those folks get contacted if their attendance is low to see if they want to resign or if they want to continue and try to improve their attendance. But for anyone who's hasn't shown up and isn't responding to inquiries, I think it's fine to just remove them.
Other comments? Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, and I know in most cases now, at least on the boards and commissions that I'm the liaison to, a lot of there has been some direct contact or some feedback saying, yeah, we did try also, or yeah, that person really hasn't shown up. And it's very few people who have given, is it just 2 or 3, right? It's very few people who haven't responded in some way now. If it was lots of folks, I would feel differently about it. And the folks who haven't been able to attend, for the most part, they're being honest and saying, yeah, you're right, I don't have the capacity for many reasons, or I moved, and so I've resigned my spot.
Yeah. Madam Clerk, it sounds to me like for those 2 people who have attended 0 and 10% and you've reached out to and haven't responded, it sounds to me like the council is supportive of you writing them a letter and saying, thank you for your service, but you're no longer a member. For the others, I think the actions you've already taken are the other 13 who you contacted. I think that's great. You do this annually?
We do it at the end of the year for the full calendar year, and then we do it at the halfway point.
Okay, so twice a year. Okay. Councilmember Reese?
I guess before we take that step, I think it's fair to ask the chair of whatever board, committee, or commission those folks are on to send an email to the city clerk affirming that. Like I want to make sure that we know, that the clerk's office knows that the board chair tells us, I've done these things, that I cannot make contact with this person. I think that seems like a fair step to take before sending that removal letter. But that's just me.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you do that? That's going the
Yes,
extra
thank you for
mile. That's going the extra 100 miles.
Well, considering COVID, I think it's worth it.
And Mr. Mayor, one more question. Do we want to continue the virtual meeting guidelines for the rest of 2021?
Well, I think it's premature to say that, but we certainly want to continue them for now. And why don't we continue them and you can check in with us in a few months.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, we'll now hear from the clerk on the decisions we made on the appointment.
All right, the nomination for the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority has been nominated to Tammy E. Hall, and that was
Thank you.
unanimous.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
All right, now we'll settle the agenda. And Madam Manager?
Before we settled the agenda, I know the council was going to have a little more discussion about.
That's right. Yeah. Right. Thank you for the reminder. Colleagues, we need to discuss the disposition of item 22. We can certainly put that on GBA. Is that your preference? I'm going to put it on GBA then. I hear no preferences. If that's all right with the manager, we'll put that on GBA.
All right.
I nod in agreement.
I got one nod that I didn't see, so that's good enough. Madam Manager, go ahead.
We have for your consent agenda items 1 through 18, GBA, item 22, and GBA public hearings, item 19 through 21.
Thank you, Madam Manager. You have heard the manager's recommendation to settle the agenda, and I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I believe we've done it. There being no further business to come before this body, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 3:06 p.m. And everybody stay safe and warm.